Rental prices across the United States have skyrocketed, raising serious concerns about who is driving these increases and how. At the center of this crisis is RealPage, a Texas-based real estate tech firm that provides rent-setting software used by some of the nation's largest landlords. One of its biggest clients is Greystar, the largest property management company in the country. The controversy stems from RealPage's proprietary pricing algorithm, which does more than just suggest rental rates. It collects and analyzes private data from competing landlords, influencing rent prices across entire cities. Critics argue that this software doesn't just maximize landlord profits, it artificially inflates rents and reduces competition. And now it's under federal investigation. A major class action lawsuit accuses RealPage and its clients of price fixing, alleging that the software essentially acts as a rental cartel, allowing landlords to coordinate rent increases without directly colluding. This claim has drawn the attention of the U.S. Department of Justice, which filed its own case warning that automating an anti-competitive scheme does not make it less illegal. Adding fuel to the fire, Harlan Crow, the Texas billionaire best known for his undisclosed financial ties to Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. He has deep-rooted connections to both RealPage and major landlord groups. His real estate empire has played a key role in shaping the modern rental market, and his influence stretches from Wall Street boardrooms to Washington, D.C. policymaking. As millions of renters struggle to afford housing, we have to wonder if this is just the free market at work or something a little bit more artificial. In this report, we'll break down how RealPage's algorithm, its biggest clients, and the billionaire backing them have reshaped the rental landscape and what it means for your rent bill. For millions of Americans, rent is their biggest monthly expense, and in recent years, it has skyrocketed. Some blame inflation, others point to supply and demand, but a growing body of evidence suggests something else is at play. A secretive algorithm built not to serve renters, but to maximize landlord profits at their expense. At the center of this controversy is RealPage, the Texas-based tech firm that provides the rent-setting software used by some of the country's biggest landlords. The software is known as YieldStar, and it doesn't just recommend prices, it collects private data from competing property managers and uses it to influence rent hikes across entire cities. According to a 2022 ProPublica investigation, the software works by suggesting rents that are often significantly higher than what landlords would charge on their own, and then pressuring them to follow through with that pricing. Critics argue that RealPage has turned private rental markets into coordinated price-fixing schemes. Instead of competing, landlords work together indirectly through the software. This concern isn't just theoretical. It's now the subject of multiple lawsuits. The U.S. Department of Justice, and in its antitrust case against RealPage, argues that automating an anti-competitive scheme does not make it less illegal. And a separate class action lawsuit brought by renters across the country alleges that RealPage's system artificially inflates rent prices by as much as 40%. As rents continue to soar, the question raises, is this the invisible hand of the market or a hidden lever pulled by corporate landlords and Silicon Valley programmers? The U.S. government is taking action against RealPage, the tech company accused of fueling skyrocketing rents through price-fixing software. The legal battle centers on whether RealPage's rent-setting algorithm violates federal antitrust laws by eliminating competition in the rental housing market. In October 2022, a class action lawsuit was filed against RealPage and its largest corporate clients, including Greystar, Lincoln Property Company, and Equity Residential. The lawsuit, brought by renters in multiple states, argues that RealPage orchestrated a nationwide cartel in the multifamily rental market. Attorneys representing tenants say the software's use of shared rental data allows landlords to collude on pricing rather than compete, driving rents far higher than the free market would normally allow. Then in December of 2023, the U.S. Department of Justice stepped in. The DOJ launched an antitrust investigation targeting RealPage and its network of corporate landlords. Federal prosecutors argue that by sharing rent data and coordinating pricing through the software, landlords are no longer independent competitors. They're part of an artificially controlled system, keeping rent inflated beyond what renters can actually afford. According to court filings, internal emails show RealPage executives boasting about the software's ability to drive record profits, even during economic uncertainty. One document obtained by ProPublica reveals that a former RealPage executive encouraged landlords to hold out on lowering rents, even when vacancies were high, ensuring prices stayed elevated. Legal experts warn that the case could reshape the housing industry. If the courts rule against RealPage, it could lead to a massive shakeup in how rent prices are set nationwide, and force major property managers to abandon algorithm-driving pricing. The outcome could mean relief from artificially inflated housing costs for renters. But with corporate landlords fighting back hard, the legal battle is far from over. At the center of the RealPage rent-fixing scandal is Greystar, the largest property management firm in the United States, managing over 700,000 rental units nationwide. Greystar isn't just a client of RealPage, it's one of its biggest beneficiaries. Documents filed in the ongoing antitrust lawsuit reveal that Greystar executives actively worked with RealPage to coordinate rental prices across thousands of apartment complexes. According to court filings, internal emails show Greystar employees regularly exchanging pricing data through RealPage's YieldStar algorithm, ensuring that competitors who in reality should be setting their own prices were instead following the same AI-driven recommendations. A former Greystar employee cited in the lawsuit stated that leasing agents were encouraged to defer to RealPage's pricing recommendations, rather than adjust rents based on market conditions. The employee recalled instances where the software suggested raising rents even when units stayed vacant for extended periods of time. Greystar's influence in the market cannot be overstated. As the dominant property management company, its participation in RealPage's pricing system creates a ripple effect across the entire rental industry. Smaller landlords and independent property owners looking to stay competitive are often forced to match Greystar's artificially inflated rates, even if that means pricing out renters in need of affordable housing. The lawsuit argues that this type of pricing coordination amounts to illegal collusion. RealPage and Greystar are accused of violating federal antitrust laws by turning competitors into collaborators, effectively rigging the housing market against renters. Billionaire Harlan Crow, who recently made headlines for his undisclosed financial ties to Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, has deeper entanglements than just judicial influence. His real estate empire, which spans luxury developments, corporate holdings, and high-profile investments, is directly connected to the rental price fixing scandal involving RealPage and its largest client, Greystar. Crow is the former chairman of Crow Holdings, a multi-billion-dollar private investment firm specializing in real estate and development. According to SEC filings and property records, Crow Holdings maintains financial stakes in RealPage and numerous property developments managed by Greystar. Investigations by nonprofit watchdog groups indicate that Crow Holdings has actively invested in large-scale multifamily housing developments across the country. Many of these developments have outsourced their pricing strategies to RealPage's algorithm. But here's where the story takes an even darker turn. Harlan Crow's political influence is well documented, particularly his lavish gifts and undisclosed real estate transactions with Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. This relationship raises major ethical concerns. Records show that Crow has donated millions to conservative causes, many of which advocate for deregulation in the housing market. His financial influence extends to think tanks and policy groups that lobby against rent control measures, pushing a pro-landlord, pro-investor agenda. The same policies allowed RealPage and Greystar to manipulate rents unchecked. These connections could complicate further antitrust rulings. If the case against RealPage and Greystar goes to the Supreme Court, Crow's financial ties to both the justices and the defendants could cast doubt on judicial impartiality. In short, Harlan Crow is not just a landlord, he is a power player in the system fueling the housing crisis. His investments shape not only the real estate industry, but also property pricing and rents that affect millions of people nationwide. For millions of renters across the United States, rising housing costs aren't just a market fluctuation. They're a manufactured crisis driven by corporate greed and algorithmic manipulation. At the center of it all, RealPage, Greystar, and a network of institutional landlords using AI-driven price fixing to push rent beyond affordability. According to public records and lawsuits filed in federal court, RealPage's YieldStar software coordinated price increases across thousands of rental units, effectively eliminating competition and leaving renters with no choice but to pay more or leave. Data from the National Low Income Housing Coalition reveals that in many cities where RealPage operates, median rent increases have outpaced wage growth by more than 30% over the past decade. The result? A dramatic rise in eviction filings, homelessness, and financial distress for working-class renters. Tenants in Seattle, Denver, and Atlanta report rent hikes of 20 to 40% in a single lease renewal cycle. Landlords cite market trends that in reality are being set by RealPage itself. Renters are not just paying more, they're being forced into financial precarity. Evictions have surged, particularly in RealPage-controlled properties where landlords are advised to hold units vacant rather than lower prices. And while RealPage and Greystar executives collect record profits, renters are left struggling to afford food, medical care, and basic necessities. The impact is particularly severe in low-income communities where institutional investors have rapidly bought up housing stock, turning once affordable neighborhoods into corporate-owned rent farms. But renters are fighting back. Tenant unions and legal advocacy groups are pushing for rent control measures, antitrust enforcement, and greater transparency in corporate housing practices. Still, without major regulatory intervention, the crisis will only deepen, and millions of Americans will continue to pay the price for a system designed to trap them in ever-rising rent cycles. The DOJ lawsuit against RealPage concerns more than just one company. It concerns an entire corporate landlord class that is rigging the housing market with AI-driven price fixing. RealPage may have provided the software, but some of the country's biggest real estate giants supplied the rent hikes, the coordination, and the corporate greed, turning homes into high-frequency trading assets for which tenants paid the price. According to the DOJ's lawsuit, companies like Blackstone's LiveCore LLC, Camden Property Trust, Cushman & Wakefield, Willowbridge Property Company, and Cortland Management didn't compete, they colluded. Instead of lowering rents to attract tenants, they allegedly fed private pricing data into RealPage's algorithm, coordinated rent increases, and ensured that no renter could escape the squeeze. Let's break down who these players are and how they rigged the game. Blackstone isn't just in the rental market. It owns the rental market. Through its real estate arm, LiveCore LLC, Blackstone manages tens of thousands of rental units nationwide, operating like a Wall Street landlord. The DOJ alleges that LivCor coordinated price hikes through RealPage's software, ensuring that tenants paid more while corporate profits soared. Instead of competing for renters, LivCor allegedly helped eliminate competition, turning housing into a financial algorithm rather than a basic human need. Camden Property Trust owns over 55,000 apartment units nationwide, and as a publicly traded REIT, its focus isn't on providing homes, but maximizing investor returns. The DOJ lawsuit alleges that Camden exchanged confidential pricing data with competitors through RealPage, coordinating rent hikes instead of competing for tenants. For Camden, housing isn't about affordable living, but stock value. Cushman & Wakefield is one of the world's biggest property management firms. But according to the DOJ lawsuit, it wasn't just a bystander, it was an enforcer in the scheme. The lawsuit alleges that Cushman & Wakefield didn't just use RealPage's algorithm, it helped landlords maximize rent increases while eliminating competition. Instead of working for tenants, Cushman worked for landlords, ensuring rent hikes were optimized for corporate profit. Willowbridge Property Company wasn't always Willowbridge. Until October of 2023, it was Lincoln Property Company's residential division. Now it's under DOJ scrutiny for allegedly using RealPage's algorithm to fix rental prices not based on demand, but on coordination and price manipulation. The sudden rebrand raises a serious question. Was this a fresh start or a corporate cover-up? Cortland Management is a real estate giant with over 85,000 rental units nationwide. But according to the DOJ lawsuit, it didn't get there by playing fair. It got there by allegedly coordinating rent hikes through RealPage. Cortland artificially inflated rents, ensuring that even as wages stagnated, tenant costs skyrocketed. These companies weren't just along for the ride, they were power players in RealPage's rent-fixing cartel. They took the basic human need of housing and turned it into a profit-maximizing algorithm, locking tenants into a rigged system with no escape. If corporate landlords continue using AI-driven price fixing, true market competition will remain a myth, and renters will be trapped in an engineered crisis. Housing is not just another commodity. It is a necessity that determines stability, security, and survival. But for millions of renters across the country, affordability is no longer an option. It's a privilege controlled by corporate landlords, hedge funds, and AI-driven rent manipulation. The DOJ's lawsuit against RealPage and its corporate clients concerns more than price fixing. It concerns whether competition or monopolistic greed will rule housing in America. For years, landlords have told struggling tenants that rent increases are the result of market forces, supply shortages, and inflation. But the evidence is clear. This crisis is manufactured, and it's not just one company pulling the strings, it's a network of powerful real estate giants using technology to eliminate competition and extract maximum profit from working people. With Harlan Crow and other billionaires influencing everything from Supreme Court decisions to housing policy, the stakes of this case go far beyond RealPage. The outcome could set a precedent, either allowing AI-driven rent price fixing to continue unchecked or forcing corporate landlords to play fair for the first time in decades. The question is, will the government hold these companies accountable, or will the housing market remain a rigged game where the only winners are those wealthy enough to never have to worry about rent? Hey folks, I wanted to let you all know about my new novel that I have right here. If you like your fiction sharp, cynical, and brutally sarcastic, then you'll want to check out my new book, Defacing the Currency: Life in Late-Stage Capitalism. It's a story of Charlie Veitch, a retail worker navigating the absurdity of capitalism, dead-end jobs, and the existential nightmare of modern life. It's part memoir, part rebellion, and entirely unapologetic. You can grab it in paperback on Amazon or Barnes & Noble for $21, or get it directly from me through Ingram Spark for just $16.63. It's also available as an ebook if that's more your style. Links are in the description. Get your copy today. Housing in America isn't just expensive, it's a rigged game. Corporate landlords, billionaires, and AI-driven pricing schemes have turned a basic necessity into an investment portfolio at the expense of working people. The RealPage scandal exposed how rent-setting algorithms manipulate the market, but it's not the only system operating in the shadows. In Michigan, a different kind of real estate monopoly is under fire, this time from within the industry itself. The National Association of Realtors, or NAR, the gatekeeper of home buying and selling, is facing a major antitrust challenge, one that could reshape how agents, buyers, and sellers navigate the housing market. If RealPage manipulated rent prices, has NAR been doing the same but with home sales? Let's take a closer look at how this lawsuit could crack open the walls of the real estate industry, and whether Michigan might be the place where the system finally starts to fall apart. In August 2024, 3 real estate professionals from southeastern Michigan filed an antitrust lawsuit against the National Association of Realtors, or NAR, along with the Michigan Association of Realtors and several local realtor boards. According to court documents, the plaintiffs, Douglas Hardy, Glenn Champion, and Dylan Tent, are affiliated with Signature Sotheby's International Realty. Hardy serves as the broker-owner, Champion as a primary broker, and Tent as a real estate agent. The lawsuit filed in federal court challenges NAR's mandatory membership policies, arguing that they violate antitrust laws by restricting competition and forcing real estate professionals to pay membership fees in order to access multiple listing services. According to a report from Now BAM, the plaintiffs claim these membership rules constitute economic coercion, limiting their ability to operate independently in the market. The case comes amid increasing scrutiny of the National Association of Realtors, as the organization faces multiple legal challenges related to its business practices. The lawsuit filed against NAR centers on accusations of anti-competitive practices that plaintiffs say limit consumer choice and inflate costs in Michigan's real estate market. According to court filings, real estate professionals in Michigan are required to join NAR and pay mandatory fees in order to access the multiple listing services, a tool essential for listing and selling properties. The plaintiffs argue that this membership requirement forces them into a pay-to-play system, restricting competition from independent agents who may want to operate outside NAR's rules. The complaint further alleges that NAR and its affiliated realtor boards have engaged in price fixing by enforcing commission-sharing policies. These policies require sellers to offer compensation to buyers' agents, an arrangement that plaintiffs claim prevents direct negotiation and artificially inflates transaction costs. Additionally, the lawsuit challenges the enforcement of NAR's Code of Ethics, which the plaintiffs argue acts as a mechanism to stifle competition by penalizing agents who attempt to operate outside its structure. Legal experts say this case could have broad implications, especially as NAR faces multiple antitrust challenges nationwide. A ruling against the association could disrupt long-standing industry practices and lead to greater pricing flexibility for home buyers and sellers. The National Association of Realtors and its Michigan affiliates have strongly pushed back against the allegations outlined in the lawsuit, arguing that their policies serve to standardize and improve the real estate industry, not stifle competition. In court filings, NAR contends that membership requirements and commission-sharing policies are designed to ensure efficiency, transparency, and fair access to property listings. A spokesperson for the association dismissed claims of economic coercion, stating that participation in the multiple listing services is voluntary and offers clear benefits to agents, buyers, and sellers alike. Additionally, NAR's legal team claims that commission-sharing arrangements are not a form of price fixing, but rather an industry norm that facilitates smoother transactions between buyers and sellers. They maintain that without such policies, home buyers could face higher out-of-pocket costs when securing an agent to represent them in negotiations. The Michigan Association of Realtors echoed these sentiments, stating that the lawsuit mischaracterizes standard real estate practices as anti-competitive, when in reality they foster a more collaborative and accessible marketplace. Despite these defenses, NAR remains under heightened legal scrutiny following other high-profile antitrust cases that have challenged its commission structures. Experts suggest that if courts rule against the organization, it could reshape how real estate transactions operate, not just in Michigan, but nationwide. The antitrust lawsuit filed by Michigan real estate professionals against the National Association of Realtors emerges amid significant legal challenges for the organization. In November of 2024, NAR agreed to a $418 million settlement in a separate class action lawsuit alleging that its commission policies violated antitrust laws. This settlement mandates substantial changes to broker commission rules, aiming to increase transparency and competitiveness in the real estate market. The outcome of the Michigan lawsuit could have far-reaching implications for real estate professionals nationwide. A ruling against NAR's membership requirements might prompt a reevaluation of how multiple listing services, or MLS, access is granted, potentially reducing the influence of realtor associations over the industry. Conversely, if the court upholds the current structure, it would reinforce the status quo, maintaining the existing relationship between MLS access and association memberships. Legal experts suggest that this case could reshape the housing industry, affecting not only Michigan, but also setting precedents that influence national real estate practices. As the legal proceedings continue, stakeholders across the industry are closely monitoring potential shifts that could impact their operations and government structures. The lawsuit against the National Association of Realtors and its Michigan affiliates remains in the early stages, with legal proceedings still unfolding. According to court records, NAR and the Michigan Association of Realtors have filed motions to dismiss the case, arguing that the plaintiffs have not provided sufficient evidence of antitrust violations. The court has yet to rule on these motions. Meanwhile, legal analysts note that the case is being closely watched in the wake of NAR's previous settlements and ongoing antitrust scrutiny. With multiple lawsuits challenging its commission structures and membership policies, NAR faces increasing pressure to reform industry practices. For now, real estate professionals in Michigan and beyond await further development that could significantly alter how the industry operates. The antitrust lawsuit against the National Association of Realtors and its Michigan affiliates could mark a turning point in the real estate industry. As courts weigh whether NAR's policies unfairly restrict competition, the case carries implications far beyond Michigan, with potential to reshape how real estate professionals access listings, negotiate commissions, and operate outside of NAR's influence. With mounting legal pressure and ongoing scrutiny of its business practices, the National Association of Realtors faces a critical moment, one that could determine the future of the real estate transactions in the United States. At the heart of this lawsuit isn't just a legal battle. It's a fight against a rigged system. The National Association of Realtors operates like a gatekeeper, turning access to housing into a pay-to-play racket. Forced memberships, commission schemes, and artificial barriers aren't about protecting consumers. They're about protecting the bottom line of an entrenched industry. Real estate should be a competitive, open market where buyers and sellers negotiate freely, not a closed-off cartel where the rules are written by those profiting from them. If this lawsuit cracks that system open, it won't just be a win for independent agents. It'll be a win for every home buyer and seller forced to play by rules they never agreed to. The real question is, will the courts have the guts to take on an industry built on paywalls, or will they let another corporate monopoly keep squeezing working people dry? From real estate monopolies to political power struggles, the battle over control doesn't just play out in the housing market. It defines the choices we make at the ballot box. While the fight against corporate gatekeepers in real estate continues, another competition is shaping up in Michigan: the race for the governor's office. With term limits forcing Governor Gretchen Whitmer out, candidates across the political spectrum are stepping forward, each with their own vision for the state's future. From Republican lawmakers touting deregulation and conservative values to Democratic contenders pushing for government accountability and economic reform. The field is set for a contentious fight, and with Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan breaking away from party politics to run as an independent, the election just got even more unpredictable. Who will emerge as the frontrunner? And what will this race mean for the policies shaping Michigan's economy, education, and labor rights? Let's take a look at where we are as of now. The race for Michigan's next governor is heating up. With Governor Gretchen Whitmer nearing the end of her term due to state-imposed term limits, a diverse field of candidates is emerging from across the political spectrum. Both major parties, as well as independent contenders, are gearing up for what is expected to be a highly competitive election. As the field for Michigan's 2026 gubernatorial race takes shape, Republican candidates are making their case to voters. One of the first to declare his candidacy was State Senate Minority Leader Eric Nesbitt, who announced his bid on January 14, 2025. Nesbitt often emphasizes his upbringing, crediting it with shaping his values of faith, patriotism, and family. He holds a bachelor's degree in economics from Hillsdale College and a master's in international business from the Norwegian School of Economics. Nesbitt's political career began in the Michigan House of Representatives, where he served 3 terms, eventually rising to the position of House Majority Floor Leader. He also chaired the House Energy and Technology Committee, where he played a key role in shaping Michigan's energy policies. Elected to the Michigan Senate in 2018, Nesbitt has represented parts of Barron, Van Buren, Allegan, and Kent counties. During his tenure, he was instrumental in the passage of Senate Bill 1, which restructured Michigan's auto insurance laws. The bill aimed to lower rates by giving drivers more choices and addressing fraud and lawsuit abuses, issues that had long plagued the state's insurance system. Beyond a legislator, Nesbitt has also served as Michigan Lottery Commissioner under former Governor Rick Snyder. With his campaign officially underway, Nesbitt is positioning himself as a staunch conservative, promising to fight for lower taxes, deregulation, and policies that promote economic growth. But Nesbitt isn't the only Republican in the race. Another familiar name in Michigan politics is also considering a bid. Another potential contender in Michigan's 2026 gubernatorial race is former Attorney General Mike Cox. Though he has yet to make a formal announcement, Cox has filed paperwork allowing him to fundraise and explore a possible campaign. Cox is no stranger to Michigan politics. He served as the state's 52nd Attorney General from 2003 to 2011, becoming the first Republican to hold the office in nearly half a century. Before that, he built his legal career in the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office, where he served as Director of the Homicide Unit from 2000 to 2002. During his tenure as Attorney General, Cox spearheaded initiatives aimed at improving child support enforcement. He launched Michigan's first ever child support division, a program designed to streamline collections and ensure financial support for families. His office also prioritized consumer protection, securing substantial financial recoveries for Michigan residents and working to block major utility rate increases. After leaving public office, Cox returned to private practice, founding the Mike Cox Law Firm. With his background in law enforcement and consumer advocacy, Cox's entry into the race could shift the conversation within the Republican field. If he moves forward with a campaign, he'll likely highlight his record as a tough-on-crime prosecutor and a fiscal watchdog. While the Republican field takes shape, Democrats are also positioning themselves for what is expected to be a hard-fought campaign to hold the governor's office. One of the first Democratic contenders to announce a bid is Michigan's Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson. Benson officially entered the race on January 22, 2025, launching her campaign with a message centered on government transparency, voting rights, and economic opportunity. As Michigan's chief elections administrator since 2019, she has gained national recognition for defending election integrity in the face of misinformation and political pressure, particularly during the 2020 and 2024 elections. Beyond election security, Benson's tenure as Secretary of State has focused on expanding voter access, implementing early voting measures, and modernizing Michigan's election system. Before taking public office, she was an election law attorney and served as Dean of Wayne State University Law School. Her campaign platform includes commitments to making government more accountable, improving public education, and enacting economic policies aimed at keeping Michigan residents in the state. Benson has also framed her candidacy as a stand against powerful corporate interests, drawing a contrast between herself and figures like Elon Musk, with whom she has publicly clashed over election misinformation. With a strong statewide profile and experience navigating high-stakes political battles, Benson is widely considered a frontrunner in the Democratic primary. However, she isn't the only contender seeking the nomination. Another Democratic candidate bringing a unique background to the 2026 gubernatorial race is Genesee County Sheriff Chris Swanson. Swanson formally entered the race on February 6, 2025, launching his campaign with a message of unity, justice, and economic revitalization. Swanson first rose to national prominence in 2020 during the George Floyd protests, when he made headlines by removing his riot gear and marching alongside demonstrators in Flint. The moment, widely shared across media outlets, solidified his reputation as a law enforcement leader willing to engage directly with calls for reform. As Genesee County Sheriff, Swanson spearheaded two major initiatives: the Ignite program, which provides educational opportunities to inmates in an effort to reduce recidivism, and the Ghost Task Force, a specialized unit dedicated to targeting human trafficking and sexual predators. His campaign platform builds on these initiatives, emphasizing criminal justice reform, expanding education programs within the prison system, and revitalizing Michigan's economy through manufacturing and job creation. Swanson has pledged to run a positive campaign, positioning himself as a unifier in an increasingly divided political landscape. With a law enforcement background and a record of social advocacy, Swanson presents an unconventional but potentially compelling choice for Michigan voters. However, he will need to distinguish himself in a crowded Democratic primary field that already includes high-profile contenders like Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson. While the Democratic and Republican primaries are shaping up to be highly competitive, there is one candidate who has chosen to forego the party system altogether. Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan made waves in December 2024 when he announced his candidacy for governor, not as a Democrat, but as an independent. The decision marks a significant departure from Duggan's long-standing affiliation with the Democratic Party and has the potential to shake up the race in unprecedented ways. Duggan, who was the first elected mayor of Detroit in 2013, is widely credited with steering the city through one of the most challenging periods in its history, its post-bankruptcy recovery. Under his leadership, Detroit saw major investments in infrastructure, public safety improvements, and revitalization projects that helped attract new businesses and residents to the city. Now, Duggan is taking his track record statewide, running on a platform that emphasizes governance over partisanship. He has positioned himself as a candidate who can bridge divides and work across ideological lines to deliver real results for Michigan residents. In his announcement video, Duggan posed a question to voters. What if we upended the system and gave Michigan voters a new choice? A governor who didn't run as a candidate of either party, but went to work every day with no goal except to get people to work together for all of Michigan. By running as an independent, Duggan avoids the crowded Democratic primary and sidesteps party line battles. However, political analysts say his decision also presents significant challenges. Michigan has historically been dominated by party politics, and Duggan will need to convince voters that he can build enough bipartisan support to be a viable contender in the general election. His entry into the race is also a wild card for both parties. Some Democrats fear Duggan could siphon votes away from their nominee, potentially giving Republicans a path to victory. Meanwhile, Duggan will have to convince independents and moderate Republicans to support a former Democrat in order to remain competitive. With the gubernatorial race already shaping up to be one of the most unpredictable in Michigan's history, Duggan's presence as an independent could fundamentally alter the political landscape. As Michigan's 2026 gubernatorial race continues to take shape, the field of candidates may still grow. Among the potential contenders is Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist, who has yet to make an official announcement but is reportedly considering a run. If he enters the race, Gilchrist would bring his experience as Michigan's second highest ranking official and his background in technology and public policy. Also generating speculation is former U.S. Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg. After relocating to Michigan following his 2020 presidential bid, Buttigieg has remained active in national politics. If he decides to enter the race, his name recognition and federal-level experience could make him a formidable contender in the Democratic primary. On the Republican side, U.S. Representative John James is another name being floated as a possible candidate. A businessman and former military officer, James previously ran a competitive statewide campaign for Senate before securing a congressional seat. His potential entry into the race could further energize the GOP primary. With high-profile candidates already in the race and others still weighing their options, Michigan's 2026 gubernatorial election is shaping up to be one of the most competitive in recent history. From seasoned political veterans to unconventional outsiders, voters will have a broad slate of choices when deciding who will lead the state into the next chapter. As the campaign season unfolds, the Bull Moose Network will continue to track the candidates, their policies, and the impact on this election for Michigan's future. From corporate landlords gaming the system with AI-driven rent hikes, to real estate monopolies controlling access to housing, and now a high-stakes battle for Michigan's governorship. One thing is clear. Control isn't in the hands of the people. It's in the hands of those who write the rules, those who manipulate the market, and those who build systems designed to keep power out of reach. History proves one thing. No system is untouchable forever. Renters are pushing back. Homebuyers are taking on the Realtor cartel, and soon Michigan's voters will have their say. The question isn't if change is coming, it's how explosive will it be. Because once power is dragged into the light, it never looks quite so unstoppable. I'm Brian Vish with the Bull Moose Network. Eyes open, voices loud.